right now and seeing if that will let me open it the way that I'm trying to. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I had to, looks like that worked to reopen it. So now you should be able to see the title slide, correct?
Hi, we can see it, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, cool.
So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here tonight for our HR certifications showdown. Thank you for your patience as well. We are going to record this presentation. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll ensure that Ms. Ricklin will answer them towards the end. And also, please stick around towards the end so we can tell you about some NAAA HR events that are upcoming. So thank you, and I'll let you turn it over to Ms. Ricklin.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for taking time out of your day to be here. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm using a different microphone today. This is an exciting topic that I love talking about. As you can see by the letters behind my name, I am a huge fan of HR certifications, as well as continuing education in general. We have a welcome slide. Angelique, I don't know, did you want to do the introduction or do you want me to just introduce myself? Either is fine, so they kind of know who I am and why I'm here. Well,
Sorry, I was taking myself off of mute.
oh,
My
that's okay.
apologies. So,
That's okay.
so once again, thank you, Ms. Ricklin Woods, for joining us here tonight. She is the founder of HR Talent Strategies. She is a four-time certified HR professional holding the SHRM-CP, SPHR, PHR, and PHRCA credentials. And she brings 20 years of HR experience to the conversation, and most certainly servicing currently as the director of people and culture in the nonprofit space. Ms. Ricklin specializes in coaching HR professionals and aspiring HR pros on certification preparation, career advancement, resume strategy, and transitioning into the HR field. She is also the host of the podcast, So You Want to Work in HR, where she shares insights and amplifies the voices of HR professionals across the industries and career stages. So thank you once again, and welcome. And I appreciate you doing this not only for our members and future members or those who are just interested in gaining more insight. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this opportunity. Let's see, I'm gonna make sure that my slide do something funky. Can you still see the slides? Cool. I'm using two monitors, so sometimes it could get a little bit weird. All right, so what we're going to get into today is really why credentials matter in HR, not just certification, but also higher education. We'll do an overview of the SHRM certification, the HRCI certification. We'll touch a little bit on master's degrees, whether in HR or other related fields. We'll talk about some comparisons of those three paths, if you will, and some factors for you to consider when looking at your career goals and where you would like to go in your HR career. A little bit of information, additional information I want to share about myself. When I first got in HR 20 years ago, I had no certification and I had no degree. I landed my first role in HR as an administrative assistant in the recruiting department. So I was pretty much a recruiting coordinator with responsibility for administrative duties as well as recruiting for some administrative positions. And so once I got my foot in HR and I really knew I wanted to be able to help people in some capacity, I decided to figure out ways I could grow in HR. And so the first thing I did, because it was a shorter process, was to pursue the PHR certification. And in all transparency, I did not pass it on the first attempt, but I did not let that stop me. I eventually took the exam again and passed in 2009. 2011, I sat for the PHR California exam. In 2015, I graduated with my bachelor's degree. 2016, I graduated with master's degree. And then 2017, 2018, I sat for the SCP, the SHRM-CP, and then the SPHR I sat for in 2020 during the pandemic, took the test at home. So that's kind of a short story of kind of my progression through HR and how I leveraged those credentials throughout my career. And the perfect example is that there is no particular order for how you might go about pursuing some of those credentials because everybody's circumstance is going to be different. So let's dive into why credentials do matter in HR. I often get the question, is it worth it? Should I pursue a certification? Will it guarantee me a different job? Will it guarantee more income? Well, there are very few guarantees in life, but what we do know for sure is that when you do have a certification in HR, it does demonstrate your credibility, a certain level of expertise in HR. One thing I like to point out as well is it demonstrates a commitment to the profession. A lot of people say that they want to work in HR, but they don't always invest in themselves and into their continuing development to the profession. So once you're certified, you'll have to continue to get recertification credits. And so that is going to be served as a commitment to the profession as well as to your own continuing development. Definitely, there are some opportunities for increased earnings with either a certification or master's degree, and definitely will open more doors for career opportunities. I actually posted on LinkedIn this morning. I was curious as I was preparing for this conversation with you all, how many positions out there are actually requiring or listing that they prefer one of the HR certifications. And I just did a nationwide search, and it was position after position after position, whether it was a more junior level HR manager, HR generalist, all the way up to vice president of HR. It was clearly noted on the job posting, either a certification required, and you had to check the box on LinkedIn whether you held the certification or not, or the certification was listed as preferred. So like, I think the proof is in what the job market is showing right now in terms of why credentials do matter in HR. And it definitely can set you apart from a competition perspective. So if you're interviewing for a position and the hiring manager is deciding between two candidates, for an example, and one candidate has certification, the other does not, that could be the deal breaker. When I went back to school to get a bachelor's degree, that was the motivation for me. I did not want the reason for me to not be considered for a position to be because I didn't have a bachelor's degree. And same thing with the master's degree. So it's really about, while you can't guarantee anything, you want to give them as little reason as possible to tell you no. And so that's where credentials and further education can definitely help you in that way. And of course, you know, when you accomplish getting certified, it also boosts your own level of confidence because you set forth this goal, studied to achieve this certification, and these letters behind your name. And I've often seen the more confident you are within yourself, the more confident you show up in interviews, etc. So all great reasons to consider getting certified. So then the big question and the most common question I get is, well, which certification should I get? And I'll be honest, it's a very personal decision, and it could come down to a number of deciding factors. I've learned from some people that their employers prefer one certification over the other. So that might be a determining factor, especially if your organization is paying for the cost to prepare for the exam and the cost to sit for the exam. They may require or request that you choose a specific exam when in doing so. So those are some things you'll want to consider for sure. But the exams themselves, they're quite different. And so I've sat for both, so I have some experience with the SHRM certification exam process as well as the HRCI exam. And so right now, and for those of you who don't know, SHRM hasn't always been in the certification business. Prior to 2015, it was just HRCI. And HRCI has been certifying HR professionals for, I want to say, almost 50 years now. And to this day, that's pretty much the core of what HRCI does. They do offer some other continuing education components, but as you well know, SHRM is involved in a lot more aspects of the HR community and supporting their membership base. Prior to 2015, SHRM supported the HRCI exam and even sold preparation materials on their website. But it made sense for SHRM to kind of start their own certification and get some of that market share, if you will, in terms of financial investment, et cetera. So they're while they both pretty much serve the same purpose in terms of career advancement, they're very, very different. So for one, SHRM still only has the two certifications. They do have some other I don't know the term that they actually call them, but more specified credentials that you can get, but the actual certifications would be the SHRM-CP, the more junior level, and the SHRM-SCP for senior certified professionals. And the focus of that exam is on behavioral competencies and HR knowledge. And then the format is 134 questions, mainly knowledge-based situational judgment, 4 hours for that exam for the SCP. I believe that's the one that's 4 hours. And then very similar to the HRCI, which you'll show is you still would recertify every 3 years. I can tell you from personal experience with the SHRM exam in comparison to the HRCI exam, the SHRM is a lot more scenarios, a lot more reading. I'm a person who loves books, loves to read, but by the time I finished the SHRM SCP exam, I was completely exhausted from reading all of the scenarios and trying to stay on task with that. So I would also encourage you to consider that when you're considering which exam to sit for, is what type of learner are you and how comfortable are you with reading comprehension and kind of the rigor that the SHRM exam may provide for you. So some of the strengths and considerations to think about for the SHRM exam: the SHRM obviously has global recognition. The SHRM brand is well known across the world. The exam itself does have a focus on real world HR application through those scenarios. And there's a strong focus on behavioral competencies that SHRM has identified while working with outside organizations to do the research in terms of defining what are the behavioral competencies that an HR professional should have. In terms of consideration, similar to the HRCI exam, there's the cost of the exam itself, the preparation materials, and if you've done any research on preparing for the exam, there are tons of ways to prepare. Some do self-study. There are books on Amazon that you can get. Of course, there are books on the SHRM website that you could get to do self-study, as well as to invest in an instructor-led preparation program. On average, it costs around, if you're going to invest in instructor-led certification, you can expect to spend somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000 to invest in getting certified. But if leveraged well, you should be able to make that back when you get your next pay increase after getting certified. And then, of course, the ongoing recertification every 3 years. So that's something that will apply with either exam. One of the sometimes drawback for the SHRM exam is that there is a fixed testing window twice per year in the spring and winter. So when folks are trying to figure out how to balance work, family, some people are in school in the evening. So when you're trying to decide on a time to study, whether or not it coincides with the fixed texting windows could be a determining factor for you. So that's the SHRM. And I will say, if you have any questions, jot them down. I can't see questions in the chat while I'm presenting, but we will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have to the best of my ability. All right, so HRCI, which is the other big player in HR certification game, if you will. Their two primary certs are the PHR, Professional and Human Resources, and then the SPHR, the senior level exam. And for those who are curious, there is definitely a difference between the PHR level and the SPHR level. The PHR level is much more tactical, where the SPHR is much more strategic and leadership based, really testing your business acumen. And I typically recommend that someone who has worked in a business partner capacity, people who hold master's levels degrees, particularly an MBA, are typically good candidates for the SPHR exam. There is a good bit of focus on the technical side of HR and US employment law. There's several questions on the exam regarding unions, um, compensation. For the SPHR, more executive level compensation as opposed to day-to-day compensation from a payroll and bonus and commission perspective. So there's what I found with preparing for the HRCI exam, it is a very holistic approach to studying for HR, because if you're not familiar, the exam covers recruiting, talent acquisition. And it's very, very discipline specific, where I find the SHRM exam is much more behavioral competency specific, whereas with the HRCI exam, each of the books in the comprehensive study material, and as well as the functional areas outlined in the exam content, cover your traditional areas of HR: recruiting and talent acquisition, compensation, learning and development, business management and strategy, risk management. So you're touching on just about every aspect of human resources when preparing for the HRCI exam. And then to be eligible for the HRCI exam, they're a little bit more stringent on experience level and education. I actually know two people who sat for the SPHR exam maybe 3 weeks ago, and both of those individuals, their application was audited. And they had to provide proof that they had the level of experience and education that they listed on their application. I've not heard of that happening with SHRM. I'm not saying it hasn't, but I don't have any direct experience. In fact, when I sat for the SPHR exam, my application was audited, and I had to provide a job description and some other information regarding past employment for them to be certain that I was eligible to sit for the SPHR exam. And that was after having a PHR in PHR California. So they really do try to maintain the integrity of the exam. It's not just about collecting exam fees, but making sure that the exam and those who hold the certifications are qualified to do so. That's one of the things I do appreciate about the HRCI organization is, again, they've been doing this so long, like that this is what they do. They certify HR folks. There is a slight difference between the way the PHR and the SPHR exam is structured. There are more questions on the SPHR than the PHR exam. And those exams are much shorter than the SHRM exam, 2 hours and 2.5 hours respectively. I'm not going to talk much about the PHR California or the GPHR. They're listed on the slide just so that you can see the HRCI organization has a lot more opportunities for certification depending on what your career goals are. They also have a suite of international certifications, so PHR International, SPHR International, and APHR International. And so they do have a different focus in the GPHR, where the GPHR kind of operates as a standalone global certification, whereas the international suite is the PHR, SPHR, APHR with an international component added to it. So if you work for an organization that is global, you might consider either the GPHR or one of the international certifications if that's something that you're interested in. And so some of the strengths and considerations to consider for the HRCI exam is that there is, again, a strong emphasis on US employment law and compliance. It's not state specific at all. HRCI is well established. And in fact, when I did my market research to see if companies were requiring or preferring certifications, majority of the companies that I saw job postings for on Indeed were interested in the PHR or SPHR. There were definitely some that were interested in the SHRM exam or either or, but majority of them seemed to be interested in the HRCI exams. So they're definitely well recognized across the US by many employers, and a huge benefit is there is year-round testing available. So if you're trying to figure out the best time of year based on what you have going on in your life and professionally, you have more flexibility in choosing a testing date. And as I mentioned, you do want to consider carefully which exam you choose with HRCI because they are going to review and evaluate your experience level and or education requirements depending on the exam that you choose. And then one thing, again, if you're looking for global knowledge, there's some limitations with the PHR, SPHR. There is a brief section on some global concepts and terms, but it may not necessarily be recognized in other countries. If you have a plan to relocate to another country, which I've been hearing a lot about lately, that's something you might want to consider. Similarly, cost for the exam preparation is going to be around the same, somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000, depending on the method that you choose to study, whether you do self-study or you invest in a preparation course. In each exam, the cost is slightly different, depending on what you decide on. All right, now one question that I get often from people who are trying to figure out what's next for them or who may be in the job market and having a hard time finding that next level job is, should I go back to school to get a master's degree or should I get certified? And my response is usually, it's really not necessarily an either or proposition. It really depends on where you are currently in your career, the time you're able to invest. I would also argue that it depends on how well you've leveraged your bachelor's degree. I spent some time as a career advisor at University of Phoenix, and I would often talk to alumni who would say, well, I got a bachelor's degree. I'm still not making very much money. Should I go and get a master's degree? And my advice to them always was not yet. If your bachelor's is not working for you yet, then you want to be very careful about investing in a master's degree because most jobs don't require a master's degree. Usually the master's degree is something that you can leverage to set you apart, again, from the competition and perhaps also leverage to negotiate a higher salary and to get a greater depth of knowledge. So I chose to get a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology because I was never a big numbers person, didn't really like numbers, didn't want to take accounting classes, just wasn't interested. But hindsight being 2020, I absolutely wish that I would have gone and gotten an MBA because if you are looking to move up the ranks in human resources. You want to become a business person who's knowledgeable about HR, as opposed to an HR person who knows a little bit about business. And so what I know I didn't get from an MBA program, I kind of had to be self-taught. So, if you're exploring a master's degree, I would certainly give some thought, especially with where we are in this economy, where we're going from a technology perspective. An MBA, if used properly, can really help you in that next step in your career. I tend to look at what's going to take me the least amount of time to get, and usually it would be certification. Some people study for and pass the exam in 6 to 8 weeks. Many people do a 12, 13-week program. So if I were mapping it out for someone, I would certainly encourage them to get certified first and then look into a master's degree program. Another reason why I think that's important is because because I went to college later in life. I was 39 when I got my bachelor's degree. I had already been in HR for about 10 years. And so I had spent some time as an HR manager, a regional HR person, worked in different industries. So by the time I started a master's degree program, I was pretty clear on the trajectory of my career. Like, I don't necessarily recommend a master's degree when you're figuring things out, because that is what can cause a little bit of regret, or start second guessing whether or not the master's degree was worth it, because perhaps there wasn't a clear plan for what the next steps of your career would be. I knew that as I segued perhaps out of traditional HR roles, that I wanted to do coaching and consulting. And so that's why I specifically went for an IO psychology degree. So I had a rhyme or reason for why I did it. But I also, really wished I had considered an MBA also, or perhaps a dual program, which some universities and institutions offer, where you can get perhaps an IO psychology master's with a business management certificate, something like that. So it's really about being strategic in terms of uh, where you see yourself going, or where you'd like to go on your career path. And so when you're thinking about a master's degree, there's certainly some strengths and some things to consider. What in my experience, the master's degree is not necessarily as practical as a certification. The certification is going to cut right to the chase. Everything you need to know from an HR perspective. Even the materials that you use to study could provide a great foundation for actual applying what you learn in the workplace. Whereas master's degrees programs are going to be very structured on course curriculum, writing papers. You're going to be doing a lot of research, where a lot of people come out of master's programs and still don't feel very knowledgeable in terms of day-to-day practice in human resources. But of course, that next level master's degree could certainly open doors to leadership roles, create some networking opportunities. For myself, I was able to negotiate higher salaries simply because I had a master's degree. No one really knew what I had gained from the master's degree. In fact, I have a very inexpensive master's degree from a very small institution based here in California, where I'm located, but they didn't care about that. All they cared about was I had a master's degree from a regionally accredited organization, and I was able to get almost $20,000 more than what they would have given someone with just a bachelor's degree. So again, you got to think about the time and financial investment. There is no direct guarantee of certification. Something to keep in mind too, some programs do offer a certificate in human resources, which is not the same as a certification. Certification, you're going to have to sit for, pass an exam, and continue to get recertification credits in order to maintain that certification. A certificate doesn't have those requirements. You just complete the coursework required and you'll get the certificate of completion. So you really want to be careful if you're exploring in a program that has a certificate in HR attached to it, that that's not the same thing and may not be recognized the same way as an actual certification where you had to sit for and pass an exam. So here's kind of a snapshot, if you will, of the comparisons between the two. As I mentioned, time may be a consideration for you depending on where you are in your career. If you're looking to, if you're on the job market currently, I work with quite a few people who are on the job market and they're wanting to get certified so that they can become more competitive in the market. The cost to consider, of course, a lot of times you're paying out of pocket for the SHRM or HRCI certification exam, whereas with the master's degree, you might be taking out student loans and may not have to come out of pocket for anything until it's time to repay those loans. So you'll have to figure that out. Again, the certifications are really more practical and applied. You're taking practice test after practice test of scenarios of kind of what would you do in this situation, where you may not necessarily get that practical application in a master's degree program. And from an employer recognition perspective, which is usually the most important thing for people, is it's often required, as I'm sure many of you have seen, if you've been in this job market at all, or preferred. And some employers may hire you with the expectation that you get certified within a specific period of time. Some employers will pay the cost to prepare for the exams as well as the exams themselves. They may require that you pay up front, and then once you pass and can show proof that you've passed, then they'll reimburse you. Some will allow you to put it on the company credit card. So it just depends on your organization, how they handle career development, what their process is like. And so again, with certification, there's the recertification process. With the master's degree, you don't have to worry about that. And then there's the testing availability, non-factor for a master's degree program. And SHRM has some limitations where HRCI is year-round. So if in fact you are, ready for that mid to senior level HR role, master's degree, if you don't have one yet, is something you probably do want to put on your radar at some point, because again, that could be the differentiator between you and another candidate. But again, not either or proposition. It's really both. And of course, you have to factor in what makes sense for you financially and otherwise. But if you can get both a certification and a master's degree at some point, depending on where you are in your career journey, I definitely recommend it. So again, you're going to want to think about, where are you? Are you new to HR? Are you at the mid level? Are you senior level, where at this point you've reached the VP level and you don't care to become a chief people officer, or you already have your master's degree and don't necessarily see the value in getting an HR certification if you're not planning to go up on that next rung of the ladder. Or if you are, hoping for a promotion or a role change within your organization, or even to a different department within your organization. And when I say department, some organizations do have learning development as a different department. Payroll is sometimes a different department. So it just depends if you're planning to specialize in some way. Of course, you got to consider budget and time availability. I work with a lot of people who want to be certified, but they struggle from a time management perspective because A, they're in school, they've got kids, small kids, they're married with family, and they have all these other things on their plate. And typically, if some people pass with very little study, but most that I know and have worked with, including my own uh, efforts to pass the exam, I've had to be able to dedicate some time to studying. You also want to consider industry expectations. So people who work in manufacturing environments as HR folks within manufacturing, for example, usually HRCI certifications are more common in that industry versus others. You also want to consider your learning style. Some people do not test well. Some people experience test taking anxiety, and perhaps an academic setting might be better for you based on your learning style. There's no high stakes exam at the end. If you complete the work as assigned throughout the program, you pass with a C or better, you've got yourself a master's degree. And then you also want to consider geographic market value. So based on where you live, and we know now a lot of HR jobs are in person or at least in a hybrid capacity. What are those local companies or those local positions looking for someone with certification or a master's degree? And then there are some common myths associated with um, master's degrees versus certification. I've kind of touched on this a little bit. I've heard some people say, though, a master's degree replaces certification. And again, that's not always true. It really depends, because if you think about who you're competing with, if you hold a master's degree but no certification and that's required for the job, then the master's degree alone might not be enough to get you the offer. Um, and then some think you can't get certified unless you have a degree. Not true. In large part, it's going to depend on your years of work experience. But now we have entry-level certifications as well. The APHR, you don't have to have a degree or HR experience. And then there's the idea that one is always better than the other, and that is not true. It really depends on your own career goals. So some key takeaways before we move into some other topics is that there is no one size fits all approach. You should choose based on your goals, financial resources, your timeline. Again, both certification and degrees can boost your career. And then as long as you're continuing to learn in some capacity, and hopefully you're all doing that, especially with the rise of AI, that's what it's going to take to stay competitive. And if you've been in HR in any length of time, you know that things are always changing. And so how we can best keep ourselves competitive in the marketplace, we never know when we're going to be on the job market again, looking for a job. And there's a West Coast rapper here that says, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And that is a mantra that I live by, because you just never know what's going to happen. We've seen that over the last couple of years, even within HR being impacted more than we've ever seen in recent times. So there's not just the HRCI or SHRM certifications to consider either. So when folks reach out to me and say, which certification should I get? The answer is usually it depends. What is your career goal? There are some people who just want to do payroll. They love payroll so much, they have no intentions on getting into employee relations. They have no intentions on doing anything concerning talent acquisition. So there is a specific certification for payroll for folks, the certified payroll professional, or there's a fundamental payroll certification. Same for benefits. Some individuals love benefits. They love the administration piece. They love the strategy around employee benefits, or they love, planning for retirement. They love the really total compensation, looking at um, incentive pay and all of those things related to total compensation. You might find that the CEBS, or Certified Employee Benefit Specialist certification, is better. Similar for talent acquisition. Maybe recruiting is your thing. And if so, there are a couple. There's the AIRS certification. There's also another organization I can't think of right now, but they have a strategic talent acquisition certification. And that's a really, really good one for folks that are in talent acquisition, because they cover, not just the basics of hiring, but they really look at workforce planning from a strategic perspective, and how, especially today with technology, with remote work, really coming at the talent acquisition workforce planning from a very strategic perspective for people who plan or hope to lead talent acquisition teams, who plan to be part of the talent management discussion. That might be a better certification for you than the PHR or SPHR that's more generalist in nature. Same with talent development. If you're a person who thrives better in talent management, talent development, learning and development. If you're not familiar with the Association for Talent Development, they used to be called TD.org. And I'm losing I can't think of the name of what it was before, but they've recently changed to talent development as an all-encompassing umbrella that includes learning development and talent development. If you think about that from a holistic approach where you might find succession planning, leadership development, things of that nature. So if you find that, the general aspect of HR is no longer appealing to you and you want to specialize in a particular lane, there is likely a specialized certification that you could explore. So again, if you're a specialist in one particular function or you want to get deeper and into a particular expertise, that's the route to go. I actually have a true story of a young lady that I worked with from a career coaching perspective who had gotten the SHRM-SCP, SPHR, 2 master's degree, and was working as an HR business partner up until last year, and realized that she actually did not enjoy traditional HR at all, and was really deciding, should I just leave the discipline altogether because I kind of hate it here. Well, after some conversation and really exploring what did she enjoy about HR, she really enjoyed the technical aspect of HR. She loved systems. So she could care less about employee relations, hated workplace investigations, but she enjoyed systems implementation. And she wound up quitting her full-time HRBP role, took a contract role at a software. It wasn't Workday, it was something, I can't think of what it was right now, but at another HR software, and it was contract, maybe temp to hire. And she was like, I'm going to explore this to see if I like it. And she fell in love with it. And now she works at a consulting firm that does implementations for Dayforce. And I actually saw a couple days ago, the company recognized her on LinkedIn for the work that she's done in this tech space. So there's HR tech to consider. So there's so many different things we can do in HR, but you just want to be very strategic with where you think you're going to thrive. And so when you're looking at specialty certifications, you also want to consider where you are in your career, where you've been, where you'd like to go, really what you enjoy doing the most. I think that's important because if you're going to invest in a specialized certification, you want to make sure that you really do love that aspect, or at least you're willing to do some exploration to see if you enjoy that before you make that investment of time and money in that area. But just know that those options are there to consider as well. All right, so I want to just go through a few kind of possible scenarios. So where you might consider, what should your next step be? So if we look at scenario one, let's just say we have an HR assistant who has a long-term goal, if you will, to become an HR BP in a couple years. So as an HR assistant, they've already likely has some foundational HR experience, but they want to be able to move into a more consultative or strategic position. So if that's their goal, then they probably want to look into, rather than going to get a master's degree, get a certification like the PHR or the SHRM-CP. That might help them to become competitive more quickly, because they'll be able to demonstrate they have this applied knowledge. Not to say that the master's degree wouldn't be on the table for later, but in terms of like what's the best next step would likely be that certification. Now, scenario number two, let's say there's an HR director without a master's degree considering executive leadership. And I'm actually going to talk about on the next slide someone that I worked with who fits this scenario exactly. She is currently an HR director with a bachelor's degree currently. So, and she currently has a PHR. So her next step before getting a master's degree probably would be to get the SPHR. That probably would be my recommendation, to get the SPHR and then perhaps consider the master's degree. And then there's the career changer. And so I often talk to folks, that's where the podcast came from. So you want to work in HR, a little tongue in cheek for those who think they want to work in HR. And then for those of us who've been in HR who sometimes question, is this really what we want to do with our life? But I often talk to career changers who are curious, how do I go about moving in the HR from another field? And so several folks I've advised over the last couple of years to pursue the APHR certification. Even if they've got a bachelor's degree, even if they have a master's degree, there is just something about having those letters behind your name that sort of makes you an official part of the HR community, even more so. And also, again, demonstrates even a further level of commitment specifically to the discipline of being in human resources. All right, so here are a couple of HR folks that I've worked with, and I know you won't be able to read what's on the slide, but that's not what's important. The first individual is her name is Sally, and when I start working with Sally on her deciding, first of all, she was interested in the PHR certification. She had worked at a very small aerospace company where she was serving as kind of the finance slash HR person, doing more finance than HR. And again, she had an MBA and she was going to go for the PHR. Well, I encouraged her to sit for the SPHR because she held an MBA. Again, the SPHR exam is very business focused, and she had over 15 years of experience in both finance and HR, kind of in a hybrid role, even though she wasn't a true HR function. And so she took my advice to heart, went ahead and started studying for the SPHR, passed the SPHR on her first attempt, and her very next job was Director of Human Resources for a consulting firm based out of Austin. The second person you see is Vivian, who completed her APHR certification. She was working as a recruiter. She had an associate's degree. And after sitting for the APHR, her very next role, which she's doing currently, was an HR specialist, where she is doing more, even though it's called an HR specialist, her job duties are much more generalist in nature. The way she described her role is very much like an HR generalist. She's dealing with employee relations, onboarding. She's doing some recruiting. She's doing some payroll. She's kind of doing all the things an HR specialist, but it was definitely getting that APHR certification that gave her the credibility for that next level role. And then the next person we have here is Nicole McCoy, who got her PHR. She is now an HR director. I worked with her in 2020. She was laid off. She was an HR coordinator during the pandemic. She was laid off. And at that time, she had no certification, no degree. And we worked together to get her PHR certified. And then after being away from school for over 20 years, she decided to go back and pursue her bachelor's degree, which she finished, I think, in leadership development in December of 2023 is when she finished that degree, and is currently at an organization where she started as HR manager, was promoted to HR director, and just sent me a text message yesterday that she got a $15,000 pay increase. So I thought, and this is just a few of the folks that I've worked with, but they do show a good range of experience and education. Only one of them has a master's degree, one of them has a bachelor's degree and the one in the middle has an associate's degree. So there is no one size fits all approach. It's really going to be heavily focused on your experience level, your career goals, the knowledge that you already have coming into the decision on whether or not to be certified. So lots of things to consider. So I know I've covered a lot. Now is the time. Well, I'd love to open up the floor for some Q&A, and hopefully I can provide some insight for you.
We have any questions or comments at all? I will unmute you, Teresa. Let's see. Well, you can probably unmute yourself. Yep.
Okay. Fun. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first off, thank you for the information. My apologies, I missed the first half of it. I was finishing up a meeting, so I joined late.
Okay.
But my question is in regards to transferable skills. Show recruiters for HR. To give you a little bit of context and background, I do have a master's in HR. I also have the SHRM-CP, which I
Right.
recently got. I have never held a job specifically that's HR based, but I am an executive assistant in the C-suite, and I have over 18 years of that level of experience, even in supporting a CHRO at some point in time, but that was not a way into HR. It was sort of like you're in the administrative track. So what are I know what my transferable skills are, but what is it to show and demonstrate that my EA experience lands me in HR above an HR assistant position?
Very nice. So thank you for sharing that and congratulations on getting your certification.
Thank you.
That's a huge step, and also completing your degree. In large part, it's going to be in how you tell your story. So what I didn't share is that before I got my first role in recruiting, I was an executive assistant. I was executive assistant to a VP at Taco Bell Corporate here in Irvine, and my next move was into HR as a recruiting coordinator. And I didn't have a degree or a certification at that time. I started doing HR stuff as an executive assistant. So I was able to tell that story. So for you, and it'll be, I would probably encourage you to set up a call with me so I can talk more specifically. What I find in working with individuals is that they're not telling their full story of their experience. You may have an opportunity to leverage some of the work you did in I think you said you have a master's degree, right?
I have two masters, one that's human resources and employment relations, and one that I
Okay.
just wrapped up in executive coaching and organizational consulting.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I want to answer this so others can learn from this, but definitely encourage you to set up some time to chat with me, because you have you have a story to tell. And if you're not telling the story on your resume, and it's more than just listing these degrees, it's really breaking down your master's degree program even into project-based learning. So that's going back through your assignments, that's going back through your curriculum, being able to connect the dots between your curriculum and the job that you're pursuing. And so really understanding how to connect the dots and identifying what were some of the things you did have some exposure to, even if it wasn't deep experience. If you were sitting in meetings as you were supporting the CHRO or whomever you were supporting, it's really connecting those dots, because in my experience, it doesn't really matter what you've done before, all roads lead to HR. If you've worked with people in any capacity, the other things you can learn in terms of, employment law, etc. But at the core of what we do in human resources, as you said, it is transferable. It's just you learning how to tell the story on your resume and in the interview. And so I might have to do a whole separate talk on that. So just definitely reach out to me so
Thank
that I
you.
can give you some more specific guidance. And it would be helpful if I could see your resume and how you're telling the story so far and how you might be able to elevate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. I guess I'm gonna put my LinkedIn profile. I see LinkedIn profiles there. Okay, thank you. Because I was like, I gotta figure out how to get my profile. Thank you, Angelique. As y'all can see, I love talking about this. HR has been such a rewarding career for me. And I actually spent some time teaching at a local community college here too for new folks getting into HR. And it's just something that I'm really passionate about. Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm impressed with what the Chicago chapter is doing. We don't have a NAAA HR here in LA doing it like you guys are. So
Hi, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I see we have another question.
Yes, thank you. My
Um,
question is more so centered around organizational psychology, and if you know of anyone who has pursued that route from HR.
mhm. In terms of like actually getting a job in that field of organizational psychology, is that what you mean? Like outside of HR and
Yeah,
more
outside of
organizational?
HR, maybe even in tangent with it, or have come from human resources
Yes.
into the industrial org psych field.
Yes, I actually have one person that came immediately to mind. She pursued a doctoral degree in IO psychology in the field that she's in. If because there's so many different things you can do. Of course, only certain organizations invest in the type of skills and experience an IO psychologist or organizational psychologist going to bring. A lot of times that's going to be consulting as opposed to a full-time job. But with this young lady, she was involved in human factors and ergonomics. So, like, she actually did her dissertation around it was ergonomics based, but like the impact that breaks have on employees, the impact that the workplace in general, lighting, um, open concept offices versus not. So she works for an organization, at least the last time I talked to her, that manufactured office equipment. And also did trainings with organizations on how to create workspaces that people thrive in because the organization is, their offices and workspaces are set up in a way that's considering what employees need to thrive. So that's one. But in large part, I've seen people who do IO psychology or organizational psychology doing more organizational development, leadership development. I actually just facilitated a 6-week leadership training at an organization, and I was able to do that because of my master's in IO psychology and leveraged a lot of what I learned in that program to develop the leadership training. So I hope that answers your question. I just don't see a lot of companies like hiring true organizational psychologists. I see most of those folks coming in as in a consultant capacity. If you are not familiar, there is an organization called SIOP, Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychologists. You might want to visit their website if you haven't, where companies do list jobs on that website.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
we have
Um,
one question in the chat, and then we'll go to Miss Flowers, if that's okay.
Yeah, I see James is the question, aside from AI, what are some other trends in HR? Such a great question. Really, so AI has, and it's been on my mind, and I've been reading a lot on it lately. So I'm trying to shift from that, but that's huge. AI is so huge right now, especially for us as HR professionals, even not just for the workplaces we serve, but for our own career development. But what I am seeing is a lot around talent development internally. So if there is a term where organizations sometimes have to make a decision if they're going to buy talent or build talent. And buying talent means going to the marketplace, trying to find, folks through your talent acquisition process, or building in terms of developing internally. So I'm seeing a lot of organizations invest not just in traditional learning and development and training and development, but also career development. There are organizations who are hiring on staff a career coach or career advisor, or they're looking for OD people who have that career component, because they're looking at how do we invest in the talent we currently have, and just relying on supervisors and managers to help people advance their careers is not always enough. You need someone with that expertise from a career development standpoint to help kind of usher that process. So I'm seeing that more. I'm seeing organizations investing in coaching in general. So folks that are interested in maybe getting coaching certifications, I think there's going to be a huge market for that, especially as you're seeing more conversation about mental health in the workplace, where there's a very fine line between needing a mental health professional versus a coach who is not bound by some of the restrictions of an actual counselor or therapist, but can still provide a level of support to employees in terms of well-being, et cetera. So I think we're still going to see a lot more happen in the well-being space, if you will, and companies are figuring out creative ways to invest in that internally.
Thank you. I know we had a raised hand from Ms. Flowers. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Good evening, and thank you for your time.
No problem. Happy to be here.
My question is, if someone was getting ready, I'm sorry.
Okay.
If someone was getting ready to accept a HRS analyst role,
Mhm.
which certification do you feel would be in alignment with that type of job?
Definitely something in the analytics space. So I would, if you're getting into the HRIS space, I would be looking into an analytics. And there are some data, maybe not specific HR, although I think Harvard, is it Harvard? No, not Harvard. What's the other they have online? Maybe it is Harvard. I'd have to look it up, but there might be an HR data analytics certificate or certification that I would definitely consider if you're in the technology space. And that's where you see yourself growing, is understanding data, because that's all the HRS system ultimately is data and reporting.
Got it. Thank you.
Now, last thing, if you think that, let's say, like you said, if you're about to accept a position in that in the HRS realm, if you think you might want to explore other things and you're not sure yet, then in that case, I would still focus on a more general certification, and I would lean more towards the HRCI, because there is a whole section within the HRCI exam prep that has to do with HR technology. So at least you can learn a little bit more about the technology component, but also explore other areas of interest, perhaps in HR.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Fun. Any other questions, concerns even about getting certified? Or pursuing a master's degree?
I'm gonna ask another question.
Yeah, sure.
So knowing the overarching of both the SHRM and the PHR certifications, and then the fact that there are a plethora of individual certificates and certifications that you can get in the specialties, does it matter to get one of those specialty certifications before you have the role?
I would say no, it doesn't matter, but I think if you say, for example, I know that SHRM has a workplace investigation specialty credential. There's a California credential. It's really all about like stacking and leveraging before you need it. So if you know and you've done your research and homework that the type of role you're looking for is going to be heavy in the workplace investigation space, and that's a key component of the job, then you definitely want to get that before you're even interviewing for the position, because that's going to create leverage for you. I love that question because throughout my career, I've come across people who want to wait until they get the job to do certain things. And I think we should always be planting the seed for the next job, even if that means taking on projects now that you're not getting paid for. I always encourage people that while this company may not be paying you for it, but the next one will, because you'll have something that you can take with you to the next organization. So as long as it's, financially feasible for you to make the investments, you should always be stacking up those credentials where you can, because we just never know when we're going to need them, and it's always better to be ready. I hope that answers your question. A couple of the things I did want to add with regard to getting certified. A couple things that I've noticed, because I do exam prep for HRCI and SHRM certification, and people come to me a lot of times after they didn't pass the exam and they attempted to go it on their own with studying. And I'm not saying self-study is not possible as long as you're really putting in the effort to do the self-study process. But some people attempt to test their knowledge just because they've been in HR for 15 years and they're like, surely I could pass this exam. But the exam is not necessarily that straightforward. What the exam prep will help you with is really understanding how to pass the exam. The exam doesn't necessarily determine how knowledgeable you are in HR, quite honestly. A large part of the exam is about how well you solve problems within HR. And so the practice and repetition of taking practice exams and studying, however you do your studying, whether self-study, part of a study group, or locally or online, the key is definitely to have some sort of study. Sure, somebody may ace an exam without preparing, but generally speaking, that's not going to be the case. And it's definitely doable with a good study plan. Again, whether you're doing that independently or with the group. And most people I know who have passed the exam, and maybe those of you who are on this call who have, like, the feeling of seeing that you passed, people call me in tears, because it is such a journey to go from, starting your study process to actually sitting through that either 4 hour or 2.5 hour exam. I'm not a CPA, but I can imagine for those who have sat for the CPA exam or some other rigorous career related exam, it is quite the accomplishment. And so, if you haven't experienced it, sometimes it's about that personal accomplishment as well. Even though they have all the other benefits that you can get from it, when you can walk into a room with that confidence that you're a certified HR professional, seems like all the doors, start to open after that. So just wanted to add that in case anyone was considering. Like, I hear all the time, I've not been in school in 20 years. I haven't taken an exam in forever. And that's fine. As long as you have a study routine that you're committed to, you'll do fine. And on that note, I know we're a little over the hour, but definitely thank you for attending. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I saw that Angelique did put my LinkedIn profile in the chat. check out my website, hrtalentstrategies.com, where I do some coaching and exam prep. And for anyone that's on this call, I am offering a 20% discount on the certification courses that are coming up this September if you are interested. So feel free to check out the website. I do a free consultation as well. If you're not sure which way to go onto the website and book a free consultation with me and we can talk through it.
I see one hand raised. Is it Shira?
Yes, I do have one quick question. Are you
Yeah.
able to share any study or prep material that you recommend for the
Mhm.
PHR? And then maybe what's a realistic timeline for studying?
Yes. So for both the SHRM and the HRCI exams, I highly recommend if you go to HRCP.com, they have what I have found to be the most comprehensive study materials. You get 6 books for the functional areas of the exam. It's really more information than what you need, but more the better. But more importantly, they have a simulated computer practice exams, both timed and untimed. And if you follow, they even have study outlines that you can download from their website. They are the most comprehensive, in my opinion. There are a ton, but that is what I recommend hands down. And from a study perspective, I generally recommend no less than 12 weeks.
Okay.
Uh, some people do it in less, but that would be my recommendation because there are 7 functional areas of the PHR exam, 5 functional areas of the SPHR exam, and so a good 12 weeks will give you an opportunity to spend about 2 weeks in each of those functional areas. There's flashcards, and if you do the online version of the book, you can even get audio for those who may be better at, audio learning. So that would be the first thing. And then if you guys aren't familiar with Sandra Reed, I'm just reaching for a couple of her books that I do like, and these are available on Amazon. I think these are supplemental. I don't know that I would solely rely on this. I'm not sure if y'all can see this, but it's SHRM. This is for the SHRM, and this was just published, I want to say maybe 2 years ago, very, very recently. But the SHRM, even though it says complete, um, I don't think it's sufficient enough. I think it's good supplement, and you can get this on Amazon.com. And then she also has a PHR, SPHR one. So I do highly recommend these 2.
I would also like to add to that because I have my SHRM-SCP that just being in previous prep groups, some people actually sell their books from like the previous year. I think that's a great idea. You can probably get it for a cheaper cost. Pretty much like I wouldn't do no more than maybe 2 years behind, 2, 3 years
Yeah,
behind. But a lot of people, after they're done with their books, they either give them away to some people. So joining those like maybe Facebook groups for people who are preparing for the exam or seeing if people are selling their books from like the prior years.
very good tip. Yes. I actually had someone in my last cohort ask me what should she do with her books, and that she did mention that she would consider giving them to someone. So because they can be the HRCP books are about $300, maybe a little bit over 300, but they're very comprehensive. I still use them as a reference. Like if I'm building out a training for an organization, I will refer to that book for some guidance if there's something that I just want to brush up on. So I use them for more than just the exam, and I've used them well beyond when I got certified. So it is an investment, and you just want to look at it that way.
Okay. Thank you so much. And then you said the first resource, the website, you said it was HRCI?
HRCP.
HRCP.
Let
Okay.
me, HRCP.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are quite welcome. And then I think there are some updates that Angelique is going to go through on the next couple of slides.
Yep, so I'll be very quick. I know we're over. Once again, thank you, Ricklin, for doing this presentation with us today. It was great. Learned a lot of additional information. I'm sure everyone else did as well. I just want to provide the audience with a few upcoming events that we do have, and all of these listed are free. We do have our town hall coming up on September 4th. It's going to be located at the Robert Half downtown, and more information about that will be coming out. You'll get a chance to learn about what we have coming up for this calendar season, about membership and so on. September 11th, we do have our legal update. We try to do those quarterly. Get a chance to learn about some new laws that may impact you for the state of Illinois. And that's going to be hosted by Jackson Lewis, and we'll be doing that in person as well at Jackson Lewis, which is located downtown. So more information to come. And lastly, as Ricklin kind of stated, and everybody kind of knows, AI is a huge thing right now. So we will be having a Leading with AI event, and we're partnering with DePaul on that event. It will be virtual September 25th. So we hope to have you all come out for those events or attend virtually. And there will be more to come on our LinkedIn page in relation to that, those events. And then if you signed up for the event tonight, we will add you to our email list and send that out to you through that channel as well. I am going to turn it over to our president of SPHR, Mr. Aaron Eubanks, to just go over a few things.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Ms. Woods. I personally found this information very, very valuable. So I personally thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your thoughts on tonight. So thank you so much. To everyone, just wanted to give you a quick update. We are adding to our team here as a board. We have a list of different openings that we have available on the board. Again, these are volunteer opportunities, but just to really strengthen in SHRM-CP, and when we are looking for different events and kind of moving forward for 2025, 2026, these are the openings that we have. If you are interested, we will have more information in regards to contact, but you can send us an email to our Gmail account if you are interested. We'll provide the job description for you to review, and then we'll kind of go through the process. But wanted to just list that here. If anyone's interested, feel free to reach out to us.
Okay. Well, thank you all once again for joining. I will let you have your evening back. Thank you for all who stayed over. So thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you at our other events, and see you then. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.